medical bay of the dreadnought Inevitable Conquest had never been so silent. Medical officers of a dozen species moved with uncharacteristic care, their usual chatter replaced by the soft beeping of life support systems and the occasional whispered instruction. At the center of their attention lay a being who, by all reasonable metrics of galactic medicine, should have been dead. Commander Zelthor watched through the observation glass, his forearms crossed tightly across his torso in what his species considered a gesture of extreme distress. The commander's normally lustrous blue scales had dulled to a sickly gray, a physiological response to the catastrophic failure he had just witnessed. "Will Voidhunter Kre'lak survive?" he asked the chief medical officer, his vocal sacs barely inflating enough to form the words. The doctor, a Medusan with tentacles specialized for microsurgery, rippled her appendages in a gesture of uncertainty. "Physically, perhaps. The cellular damage from the primitive projectile weapons is extensive but repairable. The radiation poisoning from their crude fission devices was caught in time. The chemical weapons exposure has been neutralized." The doctor's bioluminescent communication spots pulsed with professional concern. "But psychologically, Commander, he's the only survivor of a 1,000-strong Voidhunter deployment. The last report indicated full deployment groundside, and only this one returned. In a stolen shuttle, no less." Zelthor's scales rippled with suppressed emotion. "And the planet?" "Still there," came a raspy voice from the medical bed. Both Commander and Doctor turned in surprise. Kre'lak had regained consciousness, his four eyes focusing with difficulty on his superior officer. One arm was completely missing, temporary life support plugs filling the socket until a replacement could be grown. His normally sleek exoskeleton was cracked in multiple places, the military-grade repair foam visible in the gaps. "Voidhunter Kre'lak, you should not be conscious," the doctor admonished, moving quickly to adjust medication levels. "Report, must report," Kre'lak rasped, his mandibles clicking weakly. Zelthor moved closer, leaning in despite the doctor's protests about contamination risks. "What happened down there, soldier? Where is the rest of your unit?" Kre'lak's damaged mandibles attempted what might have been a laugh, though it sounded more like grinding metal. "Dead. All dead. Shouldn't have gone. The intelligence was wrong. So wrong." "Wrong? The planet was classified as a Class 13 Deathworld, yes, but the inhabitants were pre-FTL primitives. Your unit had plasma weapons, orbital support, adaptive armor." "Didn't matter," Kre'lak interrupted, a serious breach of military protocol that shocked Zelthor into silence. "They were waiting. They knew. Somehow they knew." "Impossible," Zelthor whispered. "The stealth systems—" "Failed," Kre'lak finished. "Or never worked to begin with. They called it Earth. We should call it Grave." The medical monitors began beeping more urgently as Kre'lak's vital signs destabilized. The doctor quickly injected a sedative, pushing Zelthor away from the bed. "You'll get your report, Commander," she said firmly, "but first, I need to ensure there's a soldier left to give it." As Zelthor was ushered out of the medical bay, he couldn't shake the image of Kre'lak's damaged face, nor the cold dread that had settled in his stomach. 1,000 of the Hegemony's finest warriors, gone. It was inconceivable. It was impossible. It was a disaster that would shake the Hegemony to its foundations. The briefing chamber aboard the Inevitable Conquest hummed with the confident energy of elite soldiers preparing for what they assumed would be a routine operation. The Voidhunters were the Hegemony's premier special operations unit, drawn from the most militarily accomplished species across controlled space. Their armor gleamed with the latest adaptive technology, able to respond to environmental hazards in nanoseconds. Their weapons represented the pinnacle of Hegemony research, plasma rifles capable of reducing most known life forms to their component atoms with a single well-placed shot. And they knew it. The chamber resonated with the distinct sounds of 1,000 warriors from dozens of species, each boasting about their previous exploits, or speculating on how quickly this new world would fall. "I was at the subjugation of Rigel Ix," announced Drovek, a hulking Taurian with chitinous plates so dense they were said to deflect light artillery. Gravity 3 times galactic standard, atmospheric acid content at 17%. Still, only took 2 planetary rotations before they surrendered. X, scoffed Pelmir, a slender Corvani whose avian ancestry was evident in her quick, precise movements. They were already using radio signals to beg for mercy before your dropships even landed. Now, Skaro Prime. There was a proper fight. The one-upmanship continued until the chamber's lighting shifted to the deep purple that signaled a commanding officer's arrival. The Voidhunters immediately fell silent, their various anatomies adopting species-appropriate postures of attention. Commander Zelthor entered with squadron leader Kre'lak at his side. Unlike many of the Voidhunters, Kre'lak's armor bore minimal decoration, just the 16 hash marks on his left shoulder plate that denoted successful planetary campaigns. Soldiers of the Hegemony, Zelthor began, his voice amplified through the chamber's acoustic system. Our expansion continues as planned. The Strategic Resources Department has identified a new world in Sector 8472, designated as a Class 13 Deathworld. A low murmur rippled through the assembled troops. Class 13 was serious, near the upper limit of the classification system. Such worlds typically featured hostile environmental conditions, dangerous flora and fauna, extreme geological instability, or some combination thereof. However, Zelthor continued, intelligence indicates that the dominant species has only achieved primitive industrial development. They've barely entered their atomic age and have yet to establish permanent settlements beyond their moon. The main display activated, showing a blue-green planet with swirling white cloud formations. Visually appealing, isn't it? Zelthor remarked. Unfortunately, appearances deceive. The planet features extreme climatic variation, active tectonic instabilities, regular meteorological disasters, and biological pathogens that evolve at concerning rates. The gravity is higher than galactic standard, and the planet's magnetic field and atmospheric composition will require full environmental protection. Images flashed across the screen: hurricanes, volcanic eruptions, dangerous predators, microscopic pathogens. So what makes this mudball worth our time, Commander? Called out Drovak, taking advantage of the Voidhunters' somewhat relaxed command protocols. Zelthor's scales shifted to a pattern indicating approval of the question. The planet contains significant deposits of rare Earth elements crucial for our quantum communication network expansion. Additionally, the dominant species, he brought up an image of a bipedal, mammalian creature, while primitive, shows unusual adaptability. Hegemony xenobiologists believe they may have potential as a client labor species once properly subjugated. Kre'lak stepped forward, mandibles clicking sharply for attention. Make no mistake, this operation is not expected to present significant military challenges. However, Class 13 environments demand respect. Full environmental protocols will be maintained at all times. The native species calls their planet Earth, and themselves humans. The image zoomed in on a human settlement, clusters of simple geometric structures, primitive ground transportation networks, rudimentary industrial facilities. Their military technology is based primarily on chemical propellants and basic fission devices. Their most advanced combat aircraft are simple jets using fossil fuels. Their communication networks are primitive and easily disrupted. We expect opposition, but nothing our standard tactics cannot overcome. Pelmir raised a wing arm. Previous scouting reports? Kre'lak's mandibles tightened slightly, the equivalent of a frown. Limited. Atmospheric conditions have interfered with comprehensive surveillance. However, our stealth observers have been monitoring global communications for several cycles and report nothing that should concern units of your caliber. Drovak laughed, a rumbling sound like stones in a grinder. So, we're invading a primitive death pit because their dirt has good minerals? Typical bureaucratic brilliance. Your opinion on hegemony expansion priorities has been noted, Voidhunter, Zelthor replied dryly. Perhaps you'd prefer assignment to diplomatic services instead? The chamber filled with the various sounds of alien laughter as Drobak's chitinous plates darkened in embarrassment. Dropship deployment begins in 6 hours, Kre'lak concluded. Full mission briefing packages are being distributed now. Review the xenobiology reports carefully. Primitive doesn't mean harmless. As the briefing concluded and the Voidhunters began filing out, Kre'lak noticed the ship's xenobiologist, Dr. Mira Tex, hovering near the exit. Her specialized environmental suit, necessary for her methane-based biology, made her easy to spot among the predominantly oxygen-breathing troops. "Doctor, you look concerned," Kre'lak observed. Miratex's suit emitted a burst of carefully calibrated pheromones indicating scientific disagreement. "The intelligence assessment? Something doesn't add up. The observed rate of technological advancement doesn't match their biological profile. They're developing too quickly." Kre'lak's mandibles clicked dismissively. "Primitive is primitive, Doctor. They haven't even unified their planet yet." "That's not," she began, but Kre'lak was already moving away, absorbed in final deployment preparations. As the briefing chamber emptied, no one noticed that the image of Earth remained on the display, the blue planet rotating slowly, clouds obscuring whatever might be happening on the surface below. The dropships pierced Earth's atmosphere at precisely the coordinates designated for primary deployment, a relatively isolated region far from major human population centers. As the vessels decelerated through layers of atmosphere, their advanced stealth systems engaged, bending light and absorbing radar around their hulls. According to all Hegemony intelligence, they were invisible to Earth's primitive detection systems. Squadron leader Kre'lak's ship touched down first, landing in a clearing within a densely forested area. Environmental sensors immediately began analyzing the surroundings, confirming oxygen levels, temperature, and the absence of immediate biological threats. "Deployment green," Kre'lak announced over the squadron frequency. "First wave proceed. Environmental readings match projections." The first 50 Voidhunters emerged from their dropships in perfect formation, adapted armor already adjusting to the local conditions. Multiple species moved with the coordinated precision that made the Voidhunters legendary across the galaxy. The hulking Taurians with their heavy weapons, the swift avian Corvani as scouts, the insectoid X-stick specialists monitoring electromagnetic signals. "Primitive communications detected," reported specialist Zivrix, her antennae twitching as they processed the data. "Simple radio waves, military encryption, approximately 3 centuries behind Hegemony standard." "Can you decipher it?" Kre'lak asked, mandibles clicking with mild interest. "Already done," Zivrix replied with the pride typical of her species. "They're reporting weather conditions? Curious. No indication they've detected our arrival." Druvak hefted his heavy plasma cannon. "Of course not. Their technology is practically stone knives and bearskins compared to ours." "Maintain proper formation," Kre'lak ordered. "Advance to Waypoint Alpha and establish preliminary perimeter. Scout teams, move ahead and identify any native military presence." The Voidhunters moved through the forest with practiced efficiency, their armor automatically adjusting coloration to blend with the surroundings. The planet's higher gravity presented a minor hindrance, but nothing their enhanced physiologies couldn't handle. Pelmir took to the air, her wings barely making a sound as she rose above the tree line for a brief surveillance sweep. She returned minutes later, landing gracefully beside Kre'lak. "Structure ahead, approximately 2 kilometers," she reported. "Doesn't match the primitive dwellings from our briefing files. Metal construction appears to have underground components, minimal external markings." Kre'lak's interest sharpened. "Military installation?" "Unclear," Pelmir admitted. "No obvious weapons emplacements, but the design suggests functionality over aesthetics. There's a cleared area that could serve as a primitive aircraft landing zone." "Approach with caution," Kre'lak ordered. "Stealth teams forward, heavy weapons in reserve, standard subjugation protocols." The Voidhunters advanced through the forest, sensors sweeping for threats. Something about the environment felt wrong to Kre'lak, though his instruments reported nothing unusual. The forest was too quiet, with native wildlife seemingly absent. He dismissed the concern as the natural reaction of local fauna to the presence of predators. As they approached the edge of the clearing, Zivrix suddenly stiffened, her antennae vibrating intensely. "Signal spike," she hissed. "Complex transmission burst, not consistent with known human communication protocols." Before Kre'lak could respond, The ground beneath the forward scouts erupted. Primitive but effective explosive devices detonated in sequence, catching 6 Voidhunters in the initial blast. Their adaptive armor, calibrated for energy weapons and environmental hazards, failed to react quickly enough to the simple kinetic force of the explosions. "Ambush!" Kre'lak roared, dropping into a defensive posture. Defensive Formation 3. From the tree line opposite their position, bright flashes erupted, followed by the distinctive sound of chemical projectile weapons. Primitive, yes, but fired with unexpected precision. A Taurian warrior collapsed, dark fluid spurting from a wound in his neck, where a projectile had found the narrow gap between helmet and torso armor. "How did they know?" Pelmir shrieked, taking to the air only to be clipped by something that spun her violently back to the ground. "Our stealth systems." "Return fire," Kre'lak ordered, his own plasma rifle discharging brilliant blue energy toward the human positions. The shot vaporized a section of forest, but there was no indication he had hit any of the attackers. "Second and third waves, deploy now!" More dropships descended, releasing hundreds more Voidhunters into what was rapidly becoming a chaotic battlefield. The human weapons were primitive, but the ambush had been perfectly executed, and their attackers seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at once. A human voice, transmitted on the exact frequency the Voidhunters were using, cut through the tactical chatter. "Welcome to Earth," it said in flawless Galactic standard. "We've been expecting you." By the third planetary rotation, it had become appallingly clear to Kre'lak that the Hegemony had catastrophically underestimated the humans. The Voidhunters, the elite of the galaxy's greatest military power, were being systematically hunted down and eliminated by primitives with projectile weapons and crude explosives. Kre'lak huddled with his remaining command staff in a hastily established defensive position. Their numbers had dwindled from the original 1,000 to fewer than 300 effective warriors. "How are they tracking us?" demanded Drodek, his chitinous plates cracked in multiple places. "Our stealth technology should be incomprehensible to them." Zyvrix, her antennae now damaged, twitched nervously. "They're using our own signals against us. Every transmission we send, they intercept. Every frequency we switch to, they follow." "As if they've been studying us," Kre'lak finished grimly. "Just as we thought we were studying them." "Impossible," Pelmir insisted, though her feathers were singed and broken. Stamiratex laughed bitterly. "Or so we thought. I warned you their technological development curve was abnormal." "What are you suggesting, Doctor?" "That we haven't been watching them," she replied simply. "They've been watching us watch them. Every observer we sent, every probe, every signal, they detected them all. They just made sure we didn't know they knew." A distant explosion rocked their shelter, sending dust cascading from the ceiling. "We need extraction," Pelmir said, her voice stressed. "We have to inform the Hegemony about what's happening here." The emergency beacon wasn't penetrating the humans' jamming. They had established a perimeter around the Voidhunters' position, gradually tightening it like a noose. "They're using a hybrid of their technology and what appears to be adapted hegemony principles," Zyvrix reported in disbelief. Drofek slammed a massive fist into the wall. "So we're trapped here, the pride of the hegemony, trapped by primitive?" "Not primitives," came a new voice as a section of the wall slid open to reveal a human figure wearing armor that incorporated elements of hegemony technology. "Just people who don't appreciate uninvited guests." Before any of the Voidhunters could react, the human tossed something into the center of their shelter, a small sphere that immediately began emitting a high-pitched whine. "Sonic disruptor!" Zyvrix screamed, her sensitive auditory organs already bleeding. The last thing Kre'lak saw before his own senses overloaded was the human speaking into a communication device. "Commander Zhen, package delivered, moving to Phase 3. When Kre'lak regained consciousness, more than half of his remaining forces were dead or incapacitated. What remained was a ragtag group of approximately 100 Voidhunters, cut off from the hegemony and surrounded by an enemy that had systematically dismantled every advantage they thought they possessed. Their armor systems were degrading, power reserves below 30%, and weapons at half capacity. Casualties would become non-survivable without advanced medical intervention within 12 hours. There's a human military installation approximately 20 creoles north of here, Kre'lak said, pulling up a map. Our initial scans indicated it contained spacecraft primitive chemical rockets, but potentially capable of achieving orbit. You want to steal a human ship? Drovak asked incredulously. We don't need to reach the Hegemony, Kre'lak explained. We just need to get high enough to punch through their jamming and activate our emergency beacon. And how do we get past the humans who have been systematically hunting us down? Pelmure asked. Kre'lak's mandibles tightened in grim determination. We split up, multiple small teams moving toward the objective from different directions. The humans can't track all of us. A sacrificial strategy, Dr. Miratex observed quietly. Most won't make it. But some might, Kre'lak replied. And one is all we need. The remaining Voidhunters divided into 20 teams of 5. They moved through the Earth forest in complete silence, all communication systems powered down to avoid detection. 3 hours into their trek, the night lit up with weapons fire to the east. One team had been discovered. Then another flash to the west, and another. Kre'lak's team continued, using natural depressions for cover. They were 5 creoles from the facility when they saw it, a massive installation, far more advanced than their intelligence had indicated. Those aren't primitive rockets, Dr. Miratex whispered. Those designs incorporate principles similar to our own atmospheric entry vehicles. How much of our technology have they reverse-engineered? Kre'lak wondered aloud. They were preparing to move closer when motion sensors detected movement behind them. Down, Kre'lak hissed, but it was too late. The night erupted in gunfire. 2 of their team fell immediately. Kre'lak returned fire, briefly illuminating their attackers, humans in advanced combat gear, incorporating hegemony design elements. Dr. Mira Tech stumbled, her environmental suit punctured. Go, she gasped. I'll hold them. The doctor turned and deliberately ruptured her suit's gas chamber. The methane ignited explosively in the oxygen-rich atmosphere, creating a wall of fire between them and their pursuers. Kre'lak and his remaining team member, a Zetic engineer named Vortic, broke through the perimeter surrounding the facility. They sprinted toward a sleek black spacecraft that looked far more advanced than anything humans should have been capable of building. The control panel was a hybrid, human interfaces grafted onto salvaged hegemony technology. Kre'lak managed to bypass the security using standard hegemony override protocols, another alarming sign. Vortic fell under concentrated fire as he provided cover. Alone now, Kre'lak sealed the hatch and frantically worked the controls. The vessel responded, lifting off as projectiles pinged harmlessly off its hull. As the ship climbed into Earth's atmosphere, Kre'lak reflected on what had happened. 1,000 elite Voidhunters reduced to a single survivor in a stolen hybrid vessel, all because the hegemony had fatally underestimated a species they had dismissed as primitives. Earth receded below, beautiful, deadly, and far more dangerous than anyone had believed. Kre'lak activated the emergency beacon, hoping the signal would reach a hegemony vessel before the humans could shoot him down. Warning indicators flared across the control panel. Earth-based weapons had locked onto his ship. Kre'lak pushed the engines beyond safety parameters. Class 13 Deathworld, he muttered as the ship accelerated towards space. They certainly got that part right. And that's how you escaped? Commander Zelthor asked, his scales now a sickly grey dew. The survivor nodded weakly from his medical bed, where he had spent days recounting every detail to an increasingly disturbed Hegemony Security Council. The vessel's engines were powerful enough to achieve escape velocity, though not designed for prolonged space travel, Kre'lak explained. I maintained minimal life support and drifted until your patrol craft detected my beacon. High Counselors Extra leaned forward on their gravity throne. Let me ensure I understand correctly. The humans detected our observation posts years ago? Yes, Counselor. And rather than revealing this knowledge, they allowed us to continue watching them while feeding us false information about their technological capabilities? Correct. They appear to have created entire fake cities and military bases, specifically for our observers to monitor, while simultaneously capturing enough of our technology to understand and partially replicate it? Kre'lak's damaged mandibles clicked in affirmation. The vessel I escaped in was perhaps 60% human design, 40% adapted hegemony technology. Crude by our standards, but the fact that they could integrate the systems at all suggests a technological aptitude far beyond our assessments. The council chamber erupted in alarmed conversations. The cacophony reflected their collective dismay. The most concerning element, Zelthor said, is not just that they defeated our Voidhunters, but how they did it. They prioritized capturing our technology over simply destroying it. They were fighting a war of acquisition, not just defense, Intelligence Director Kre'lak concluded. They wanted our technology, our knowledge. And now they have it, Kre'lak added grimly. 1,000 Voidhunters worth of advanced armor, weapons, and communications equipment. At least 3 captured dropships, and whatever they've gleaned from observation posts over the years. How did we misjudge them so severely? Zextra asked. Because they wanted us to, Kre'lak replied simply. Everything we observed was what they chose to show us. While we watched their primitive jet aircraft, they were reverse engineering our technology in secret facilities. And now they know the hegemony is real and that we intended to subjugate their world, Zelthor said heavily. Worse, Kre'lak added. Whatever defenses they revealed during our invasion, I guarantee they have more that they kept in reserve. The council fell silent as the implications sank in. Never had they encountered a pre-FTL civilization capable of defeating their military so completely. Recommendations? Zextra finally asked. Quarantine the system, Intelligence Director Kre'lak suggested. Prevent any further technology transfer at all costs. And if they've already built ships capable of reaching nearby systems? Zelthor asked. We detected unusual energy signatures from Mars and their moon that suggest extensive installations we were previously unaware of. Then we may have already lost, Kre'lak said simply. You didn't see them, Commander, the way they fought, the way they adapted. They used our technology against us within days of capturing it. Imagine what they'll do with years. One standard cycle later, Kre'lak stood on the observation deck of the diplomatic vessel Reason Discourse, watching as Earth grew larger in the view screen. His physical wounds had healed. The psychological ones would take far longer. Are you certain about this, Ambassador? Asked Captain Kre'lak. Kre'lak clicked his mandibles in grim humor. No, Captain, I'm not certain at all, but the Council is. After reviewing my report, they determined that conventional military approaches would likely fail. The humans have demonstrated they can reverse engineer our technology with alarming speed. A prolonged conflict would only accelerate their development. The diplomatic vessel continued its approach, broadcasting continuous peace signals. They had sent advance notice of their arrival and received a terse acknowledgement, but no further communication. It still seems irregular, the captain observed, to offer diplomatic recognition to a pre-FTL species. They won't be pre-FTL for long, Kre'lak replied. Intelligence estimates they'll achieve independent faster than light travel within 5 years, given what they've already learned from our technology. The ship's sensors detected multiple Earth vessels rising to meet them, craft that showed clear influences from hegemony design but incorporated uniquely human elements. A transmission came through, displaying a face Kre'lak recognized with a jolt of alarm. Commander Zen, he said, unconsciously touching his still healing mandible. The human who had so thoroughly destroyed the Voidhunter invasion smiled thinly. Former squadron leader Kre'lak, or should I say Ambassador Kre'lak now? We've been expecting your return. We come in peace, Kre'lak said, using the formal diplomatic phrase that felt so strange coming from a former Voidhunter. So, you say, Zen replied. Last time you came with an invasion force. The hegemony recognizes that errors were made. We seek to establish proper diplomatic relations. Zen's expression remained neutral, but Kre'lak thought he detected something like amusement in the human's eyes. Follow our escort vessels to the designated landing coordinates. Any deviation will be considered hostile action. As the communication ended, Captain Kre'lak chittered nervously. They're not exactly rolling out the welcome mat. Would you, in their position? Kre'lak asked. They just defeated what they believed was a full-scale invasion. Now the invaders return, claiming to want peace. Do we want peace, I mean? Kre'lak watched the human vessels flanking their ship, sleek, predatory designs that somehow managed to look distinctly Earth-made despite their incorporated alien technology. In just one planetary cycle, they had progressed from reverse engineering captured equipment to developing their own aesthetic and functional improvements. What we want doesn't matter anymore, Kre'lak replied. For the first time in 10,000 cycles, the Hegemony has encountered a species that forced us to the negotiating table rather than the way around. We're not here to offer them peace. We're here to beg for it. As the diplomatic vessel followed its escort toward Earth, Kre'lak reflected on the irony of his new role. From elite warrior to humbled ambassador in a single mission, all because the Hegemony had made one critical mistake. They had looked at a world teeming with life, with dangers, with constant challenges to survival, and had seen only the environmental hazards. They had classified Earth as a death world because of its volcanoes, its storms, its predators, its pathogens. They had never considered that perhaps the most dangerous thing about a death world wasn't the planet itself. It was the species that evolved there, the species that didn't just survive such a world, but conquered it. You know, Kre'lak remarked to Captain Trelvik as they began their final approach, in the xenobiology briefing they told us humans have a saying, "What doesn't kill you makes you stronger." Seems like a simplistic philosophy, the captain replied. Perhaps, but consider this. We've found thousands of worlds across the galaxy. Most life evolves on stable, predictable planets with minimal environmental threats. The species there develop accordingly. Kre'lak gestured toward the blue planet filling their view screen. Then there's Earth. Constant disasters, extreme climatic variations, aggressive pathogens, deadly predators. The humans didn't just survive all that, they thrived because of it. Each challenge made them more adaptable, more innovative, more determined. He clicked his mandibles in that same grim humor. We called it a death world, they called it home, and we just gave them a reason to leave it. Ancestors help us all, whispered Captain Trelvik, as the diplomatic vessel began its descent toward a future none of them could predict.